Traditional Rose Bowls, national championship games, top 5 regular season matchups, and now a playoff game at the Rose Bowl. This is becoming quite the series between these two schools that flash the O in different block and curved signatures there. Between Oregon and Ohio State. Glad you could join us here at the Voice of College Football on a special edition, Rose Bowl edition, with these two guys down at the bottom. Of course, Steve Hellwagon, 247 Sports Bucknuts, always here for us, as is Tony Gerdeman. BuckeyeHuddle.com is the place to be right there. And, of course, the Buckeye Weekly podcast. Gentlemen, how you guys doing?
Doing great. Well.
These guys coming through for me on a Saturday, so appreciate that. And stopping by to give the other side of this mammoth affair is, of course, Ryan Winter, joining us on a regular basis from Sports Chat 503. You can catch Ryan's work right here on YouTube. Good to see you, Ryan.
Thanks so much, Mark. Appreciate you.
These three will be at the Rose Bowl. I will be watching from home. So, Ryan, we'll start out with this one. Of course, much talked about in regards to this first matchup, going down to the second final play, a 1-point game. Jordan Burch is the most obvious addition from a health standpoint for this Oregon team. But when you look at his addition, what that means, and then anything else that you see different out of this Oregon team a couple months later.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. Welcome, gentlemen. Good to see you guys. Yep. The addition to Burch, I think, is going to be a big deal because it's going to be about the quarterback play and who can push what guy off his spot, right? I think the big thing for Ohio State in this last game against Oregon was, they didn't put that much pressure on Dylan Gabriel. They actually did put pressure on him, but he was just able to get the ball out quick enough with his hands. The guy's very savvy quarterback, or they were able to pick up blocks here and there. They're going to have to put a lot of pressure on this Oregon offense because the Oregon offense can score when you go down the route, when you go down the schedule. There's not a lot of great offenses that the Buckeyes had to face like Oregon was this year. Oregon proved it in the game against Ohio State, just answering each bell for the most part. I think for Oregon, though, it's going to be about trying to just hang with those receivers, right? I think if Oregon can make Ohio State a little one-dimensional by trying to stop their run and putting everything in front of those receivers and making them be the star of the show, that might be all right, but they're still going to burn you. I mean, in the last game against the Ducks, they both had great days, almost 100 yards each of them. So it's going to be a tough situation. I think it's going to go right down to the wire again, and it's going to be an instant classic, man. I can't wait to go.
I had a question about the Penn State game, because we've talked about that performance. Well, we for our podcast, we watched the Wisconsin game, the Washington game, and the Penn State game, and wild variations in all three of those games. And some of the feedback that we got was there's a flu outbreak prior to the Big Ten championship game, and that was part of the reason the defense struggled so much against the run. Can you speak to that? And then also, are there concerns stopping the run? Because the defensive line that we saw against Washington was not the same defensive line that we saw against Penn State. They were they dominated Washington, and they were absent against Penn State.
Yeah, I think two things there. I think the flu thing, I think there was something going on with some of the guys who I've talked to right after the game didn't have any problem with it or didn't say anything about it. But, at the end of the year, teams are going to be sick. Teams are going to be banged up, flying around. Things like that happen. Again, I can't really speak on the injury front, but I can say that Penn State was a team that took the first couple shots from Oregon, looked like it was going to be a blowout. And then all of a sudden they just regrouped, went back to what they do best, which is control the clock, run the ball, go to the tight end. And they did a pretty good job in the next 3 quarters, basically, of playing their brand of football. And I'm an offensive line guy. That's how I kind of see through the lens, is through the offense and defensive line, through the defensive ends. And, I thought they did a really good job maintaining Oregon's pressure. And I thought Drew Aller did a good job of moving the offense up and down the field without really seeing that much from those guys that we had seen before. I mean, the guys came off of a banner day against Washington, like you said. Wisconsin, they couldn't really get much pressure on the guys. Washington, they completely went bonkers. And then against Penn State, I just felt like it was a much better offensive line. And then the other thing about Penn State is that they never gave up on their thing, right? They kept running the ball, which then opened up some passes a little bit. And I think that's the big thing is that if you can just stay true to your game, when you go up against these teams, I think the better team is going to dictate the terms over time. And it felt like at the end of that Penn State game that Penn State was playing like the better team. Oregon's offense was keeping them in the game, but Penn State played a hell of a game that game. It really surprised me. I was very impressed with that team by the end of it. In the first quarter, I was like, oh, here we go again. And by the end of it, I was like, oh, no, this is a team that's legit, and they could actually make a pretty good run in this playoff.
I wonder if there's just a little bit of a let up from Oregon because it seemed like the game was over. And then
it did feel like that. It did feel like that. And then also from our perspective, I know the players wouldn't say this, but from our fan base perspective, we thought we were going to play you guys. So we were really pumped up about a possibility of a rematch in the championship. And when the Buckeyes lost to the team up north, we were disappointed as well because there was a lot of I can't speak for all the Duck fans, but I know a lot of Duck fans were wanting the best of the best to get rematched again and then possibly see each other again in the 12-teamer.
I will throw out a question about the receiving group. It felt like maybe they were a little banged up the first time Ohio State played Oregon. And obviously Trayshawn Holden got thrown out of the game for spitting on Davison Igbinosun. Where is that group right now? Are they all back fully healthy? And, it looks like, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, at least 9 different guys caught touchdown passes this year. Looks like they've got, as we saw it, a lot of different people that can make plays for that offense out wide. Just what is the state of the receiver core? Because I think, Gabriel is only going to be as good as his receivers are ultimately in the matchup with the Ohio State secondary.
Yeah, I totally agree. Tez Johnson's the number one guy just because what he does is so unique. I think he's just so fast. He's got a very good knack for the ball and for being able to catch the ball and still be able to have contact. And as small as he is, I heard a great one. Brian Baldinger, he said that this guy is so small he needs to jump around in the shower to get wet. I thought that was a classic Baldy line. But yeah, no, the Trayshawn Holden going out of that game was a big deal. He's a big body receiver. He's a short yardage receiver. He's a guy who can take a short yardage gain across the middle, especially on a slant, and take it for, 10 to 15 more yards, or even take it to the house. The Gary Bryant Jr. was a guy who was out during that game. But Evan Stewart, I thought, was really amazing in that game. I think the surprising thing for us when it came to the Ohio State game, and I was at that game at Autzen. I don't miss any game at Autzen. This was the biggest game in Autzen Stadium history. I've said it over and over on my channel that this is the number one thing of all time because of Ohio State. Oregon plays there every other week. It was the Ohio State that brought that level of importance to that game against the Ducks there at Autzen. And so to think in terms of, what was the difference in that game? What was the separator? It was, I think, Oregon's ability to go over the top. I think that was a thing that people were not really expecting. I saw numerous comments about Denzel Burke, just yesterday or today when they were talking in the press conference about trying to hype him up, or that was a point of contention or whatever the case may be. He wasn't the only one in the Big Ten that got burned by the Oregon Ducks. Went over the top on just about everybody. And the only team that really they didn't have success was against Wisconsin and for whatever reason. And I felt like even with Wisconsin, it felt like they just fell into the Wisconsin trap of trying to play their game and trying to beat them their way, which is, running the ball and whatever the case may be, just not trying to be that explosive with the offense. Oregon's offensive game plan against Ohio State was very, very risky and very explosive in my mind, but there was a risk reward that they won on. The ball over the top to Tez, the ball over the top to Evan Stewart early. That's number 7, number 15. I mean, those guys just played a great game. I think Evan Stewart had almost 150 yards receiving that game, right? So yeah, I mean, that was unexpected from a Duck fan. And we knew that Oregon could go out there and run the ball pretty much against anybody. They knew that Ohio State had the best defense, had one of the best fronts, but it was about, could they go over the top on that great defense? We knew that Caleb Downs had just entered the chat with you guys, who I thought was the best player in college football defensively before he even got to your guys' team. And then it feels like he makes your team that much better. But it really was the surprise to me in that first game was Oregon's ability to throw the ball and Oregon's ability to keep their quarterback upright and not have any pressure from Jack Sawyer and JTT. Those were the two guys that I felt like they could be the most disruptive, and it turns out that they really weren't. That's kudos to Oregon's offensive line, but I think that's also goes to show you kind of what the game plan was then. It was fairly vanilla defensively for Ohio State the first time.
If I could slide in real quick, just because you mentioned Evan Stewart, and he had the huge game against Ohio State, 7 for 149 and a touchdown, and he was obviously much heralded coming into college football as a 5-star and had nice seasons at Texas A&M. So we expected him to be an impact player. But other than that game, he's had maybe one other good game, and otherwise he's been pretty non-existent.
Yeah. And I think that part of the reason why they went to him the way they did in that Ohio State game was because Ohio State was doing such a good job covering everybody else. Again, I think that sometimes it benefits you to be the number 2 or number 3 receiver. And even the way that Oregon utilizes the tight end, I would say the tight end is almost the number 2 receiver, in priority list of going down the line. So I'm a big believer that the 2 or 3 spot can get you really paid if you do it the right way, if you're in one of these really good offenses with a great wide receiver room. And we knew going into this year that this was going to be a big difference from Oregon historically. Oregon historically has always had good offenses, but they've rarely had a really elite wide receiver room and a really elite deep wide receiver room. Might have 1 or 2, but rarely do you have multiple guys there that you can exploit that are all really good players. And now they do.
I think part of the problem for Ohio State that first game was the fact that Oregon wasn't going over the top successfully before that game. I think there was a stat at one point that Dylan Gabriel hadn't even attempted a pass to the right down 20 yards downfield or more. And then right away in that game, that's what they were doing. They were going against tendencies and throwing deep. And I think a lot of times you'll see like Denzel Burke basically just stopping at the sticks, expecting that's where the throw is going to be. And I think the game plan was a lot about stopping them at the sticks, but Oregon's receivers just kept going past the sticks, and Ohio State wasn't able to recover from that as well as they should have. So this time, it'll be a different game plan for both teams, and because nobody's going to do the same thing they did last time. And Ohio State, if they do the same thing they did last time, they're fools. But also now this kind of opens up everything else for Oregon's offense in terms of a lot of the short stuff that they probably wasn't available the first time might be available more. But you'll see a more aggressive Ohio State defense and a more aggressive blitzing attack. But really, like Dylan Gabriel is probably the most equipped guy to handle all of that because he's under control all the time. It's really remarkable just how calm he is when he shouldn't be calm, because I don't know how he sees anything, let alone how he sees everything.
That's a great point. Early in the season, the first 2 games that he was under pressure more than Bo Nix was in the previous 2 years. And, there were people who were saying, oh, God, it's the offensive line. It's this, that, and the other. What's the deal? And I actually thought, as a former offensive lineman, this quarterback is just too cool. He's just he nothing rattles him. I mean, the pocket's falling apart around him, and he's still in here. It's like Bo Nix would have been gone. Bo Nix avoided a lot of sacks with his feet, got the heck out of there, whereas Dylan Gabriel's willing to kind of hang out there a little bit longer. And it feels like his clock is slower than everybody else's clock when it comes to the in play, in between the snaps. And I just feel like he's a guy who has proven it every single step of the way. There were some question marks early on this year about, is he the right guy or whatnot? And everybody does this in every school that has these transfers, because you don't know what the transfers. If they even said that about Bo Nix, they're like, oh God, here we go. And Bo Nix came out and was a great quarterback for 2 years. Dylan Gabriel's come in here and been a freaking great quarterback for the Ducks. So, he's a very cool, calm, collected guy, and I've chatted with him numerous times, and he's the exact same way when you talk with him. He wants to talk with everybody. He shakes the hands of the security guards and stuff on the way out of the building. He's just a very gracious guy, and he's a very humble guy for being as good as he is. But the guy can really spin it. He's a guy who can he sees the field. He's like a classic point guard who's going to make passes that no one else on the court really sees. He sees it, and he passes guys open. He's just got a great touch on the ball. He can throw the ball deep. I don't know what his prospect is for the NFL, but he's a great college quarterback.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up about Gabriel and the misgivings of the fan base after the Michigan game, we were still getting, when Howard threw 2 interceptions, we were still getting messages on the message board. I don't think Howard's the guy. And then he went out in cold conditions last Saturday, 24 of 29 for 310 yards, 2 touchdowns. And he got victimized on that interception. It went off Jeremiah Smith's hands while he was being interfered with, and up in the air to Brooks, the player from Tennessee, who got a foot down in bounds back of the end zone for the interception. Otherwise, he has a clean sheet. So, and that would have made it 28-0 if they complete that pass. So Howard has finally redeemed himself, it seems, in the eyes of the Ohio State fans, 13 games in. And, certainly Gabriel being the runner-up in the Heisman Trophy balloting or was he number 3, I guess?
Yeah. Genty was the guy everybody thought should have got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I sorry to cut you off. I think Howard's fantastic. I mean, he looks like the prototype quarterback. You look up on the dictionary what a quarterback looks like, and he's the guy. So I'm glad that people are finally allowing him to be the starter. These are the situations that transfer. You never know what you're going to get, right? And sometimes it's not an automatic thing. He's been great all year. I mean, it had a couple of bad games. You got to tip the cap to Michigan a little bit. They played tough that game.
Yeah. I think the thing about Howard that I'll say, and I know the fans that are Ohio State fans on the chat can weigh in as well. Howard, every time he's spoken to the media, it's very clear how much he cares and how much this means to him. And I think Ryan Day and Chip Kelly have both talked about not only has he been a good leader for the team in the locker room, but he has also been a good contributor behind the scenes in building the offense week in and week out, and sits in the game planning meetings, and he will tell them point blank, yes, I like this. No, I do not like that, based on what I've seen and what I know I can do. And so I think that's been invaluable to them. The offense really only had one bad game all season. It just happened to come at the absolute wrong time. And I think it was a byproduct of Ohio State couldn't run the ball against Michigan, and he got dinged up. I mean, second quarter, he took a heavy hit. He was 6 of 8, I think, before the hit, and something like 13 of 25 afterward, and just not the same. So it was kind of a perfect storm of everything that happened that day. And believe me, in my 30-some years of doing this, I've seen a lot of perfect storms, and most of them not good for the home team. So, yeah, it happens from time to time.
Yeah, well, I tend to think that, that game, he's only going to play the calls that are called for him to run, right? And I feel like there was a lot of discussion about maybe that they were running a little bit too conservative of play calling, especially when they're down by the goal line. And we being, former Chip associates as well, we've felt some of that as well. We've felt some of the times where we got burned here with Chip doing this, running the same 2 or 3 plays over and over and over, and not having a great result. And people were not booing actively in the stadium like I heard during that game, but it was frustrating to see a team with that many weapons keep it in first gear. So hopefully it'll be a banger of a game on Wednesday.
Yeah, for Chip Kelly, it's deja vu. He's back at the Rose Bowl where he coached the last 6 years for UCLA. And already it's his second time. I'm sure he played Oregon when he was at UCLA, but second time this year going against Oregon, where he, built his reputation the first go round. And I'm old enough to remember I asked him before the Rose Bowl, the Masoli Rose Bowl 13 years ago, what it would mean for building that. He was just building the Oregon program at that point, what it would mean to get a win over Ohio State in that situation. And, he had a good answer to it that day. And he's been really good to deal with, I think, at Ohio State, other than that November the 30th is a day that will live in infamy. But he certainly redeemed himself, I think, with how they came out against Tennessee.
Yeah, well, that first quarter against Tennessee answered a lot of questions. And if that team can play the way they played against Tennessee in that first quarter the rest of the year, I don't think anybody's going to beat them. But, yeah, Chip is a guy, one of the things for us is, he left Oregon without a real negative divorce, right? We still love Chip. He went on to the NFL. He didn't have the success in the NFL that people maybe thought he was going to have or that he thought he was going to have. Bounced back to college. But the Chip that we had, no one else has had. No one has had the success that Oregon had with Chip. Chip was innovative with us. He was brand new. He was doing stuff. He dusted off the old Carlisle Indians playbook. I always joke about that. You know, people are like, oh, this is all brand new plays. Like, no, it isn't. These are plays from when we didn't throw the ball. This was when the game didn't have the forward pass. This guy's breaking out some play number 1, 2, 3, and 4 out of that playbook. And he's really become more conservative, I feel like. His time in the NFL and his time at UCLA, he's always had a good running game. They've always been a good running team. And he, you know, I always kind of think coaches think and see things through the position that they played, you know, and he was a tight end. And as a tight end, you better block. You better do what's right for the rest of the team. You got to make a play when you need to make a play, but you can also kind of do it all. You can sub for the quarterback if you needed to. So the guy's in a really unique spot in his life. He's made all the money he needs to. He's happy as a clam. He gets to be with Ryan Day, who he really likes, and he has an enjoyable time. I feel like he's probably the happiest now he's ever been in his life.
He'd probably tell you that too.
Well, and just knowing Chip as much as I have, we knew him when he was here, obviously, and you know he was pretty happy and content here as well. But you could tell he was destined for other things. He was not going to stay here long, and that's the difference between him and Dan Lanning. Now, there's a lot of people still stuck on Chip as Chip being the ultimate. Dan Lanning's got a better record now in 3 years. Dan Lanning is, and I joked the other night with a guy who covers the Ducks here. I said everybody thinks that Chip time was the best. I think it's actually right now. I think we're in it right now. These are better recruiting classes. We're in the NIL. We're in the Big Ten. We're in the whole discussion about these guys, top flight guys across the country coming to work. We didn't have that kind of buzz with Chip. Not even close. We went to that game against Auburn. We were outmatched in that game. We kept it close. Played the little duck, you know, played your heart out kind of a game. But, you know, and then to see you guys, that was right after Chip with Mark Helfrich, but it was still basically the Chip team that lost to Ohio State in 2015, and then and I was at both those games, by the way. So it's going to be fun to see this thing come full circle, and also it's fun to see Dan Lanning be a traditionalist. Dan Lanning is not a guy who's, you know, thinking outside the box. He's clearly in the box. He's thinking 100% in the box. He's from the traditional side of things, and he's from the Kirby tree that's very traditional. And he, you know, it's kind of cool to see a guy who's doing it, quote unquote, the right way that a lot of people can respect, as opposed to Chip, who has always kind of felt like he was running a circus out here, running the Princeton offense. It was a gimmick. You know, nothing about Dan Lanning's a gimmick.
Yeah, I know that a couple times on the goal line, Chip has channeled his inner Woody Hayes and gone to the robust T with three running backs lined up alongside one another, and it's worked really well. I mean, they've had a blocking back out in front of the running back, and it's produced some touchdowns.
Why wouldn't you work for Woody? What changed?
Yeah.
And again, I think if I remember
correctly, 1974, he may as well dust it off.
If I remember correctly, though, the first play of the spring game or something that he was there, they rolled out the old Woody formation. And that's the kind of guy Chip is, man. He knows the history of the game. He respects the history of the game. And he would tell you first thing, he would not be anywhere without the game of football.
Yeah.
Football is his thing, 101.
The most recent history of this game was obviously 32-31. So I get where Ohio State fans are pointing to certain things saying, this is why we're going to be better. But I can also understand why Oregon fans, Jordan Birch is playing. Trayshawn Holden should be able to play an entire game. A number of other things. Ohio State got a bit of a gift touchdown their first time on the board at Autzen Stadium. On the Ohio State side, it's, well, we don't have to play at Autzen Stadium. It's a neutral site. Rarely do you see a running back get the ball ripped out of his hands and taken away as a possession. It's a great play, but rarely do you see that. So rarely do you see an onside kick work the way it did, or
never seen an onside kick like that in my life, Mark.
So there are
I don't even think it was an onside kick. It was they were
like
just trying to squib it. Yeah,
and it was unbelievable. I've never seen it, and how much collective football have all of us watched in this room? And we're all like, "What the hell just happened there?"
It was a great
direct
kick.
shot.
Yeah, great kick.
No, Mark, you're onto something there. I think everything is tuned up for this being the game of the year.
Yeah. So basically, I'm looking at both sides being able to say, well, this is why we should be so much better this time than we were the last time. But both have a laundry list of that. But it's adding up, according to Vegas, as an Ohio State 2.5-point favorite. Does that make sense to you, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I never think of Vegas. I don't gamble myself. So I always kind of look at the line. I always kind of think Vegas wants one group to put money down that they're probably not going to put down unless the line is such. The line is like a hook, right? So I always kind of think of it in terms of Vegas will tell you who they think is going to win. They think Ohio State's going to win, but they will tell you in a way with the point total of like, well, how about you throw some money down just to make sure about that, which is their game. I get it. I think Ohio State was favored the first time at Autzen, correct? I'm assuming the neutral site thing with a Rose Bowl has no bearing on it whatsoever. Ohio State travels beautifully anywhere. They could be on the moon. I thought that was funny about Tennessee. Immediately, I went to the Tennessee people in that game. Went to Paul Feinbaum, of course, and they're like, "Well, we won the attendance award." Basically, great. we had fans that went to a game. It's like, dude, of course, the Ohio State fans came to Autzen Stadium in such a level we have not seen it before. We were hearing that Ohio State fans were buying our season tickets just to make sure that they had a ticket for our game. Imagine buying another team's season ticket just to be able to have. I mean, that's a level of dedication. So
that's absurd.
It is a little absurd, but it shows the magnitude of how much this means to people. And again, I think that's important to understand that these two teams are absolutely the best teams in the country. And in my opinion, this year, the SEC took a step back. And of course, ESPN will never let you hear that. But to me, these are the two best teams in the country, and they get to play in the most iconic venue in the country. And like I said on another guy's show the other night, I said, there's not many things that our country can all agree on, right? I'm an independent thinker when it comes to politics. We can't even agree on what ice cream's the best. But I think most people agree that the Rose Bowl is pretty awesome. And there are some people who believe it's the absolute best, and other people who believe like, yep, it probably is. It probably is. They don't really want to admit it. It's not really the South's thing, but even the South respects the Rose Bowl. So on January 1, 5 o'clock East Coast time, 2 o'clock West Coast time, when that sun is shining, Pasadena, there's no place better. And I think for college football, we earned this. They had so much things change from us, from our West Coast. They took our whole goddamn conference. I mean, and so finally we get something that's redeeming, something that we old schoolers can say, hey, this is something we remember, a classic Midwest, West Coast matchup in the Rose Bowl.
I'll say this first: chocolate is the best, but also
I would go vanilla.
See, and well, Mark, let's go back to 3, please, Mark. No, everybody loves the Rose Bowl, and even if you don't think it's the best, it should be the national title game. That's where it should be every year, because it's still better than any NFL stadium you can come up with. And the SEC might be like, well, we need it in the South, and it's like it's better than anything in New Orleans. It's better than anything in Atlanta. But of course, you're not going to allow the Rose Bowl to lowball the bids and get it every year. So the CFP is going to get as much money out of the venues as they can. But in terms of people saying this is the national championship game, I think it's a great place to play the national championship game. This won't be the national championship game, and if the winners think it is, then they're losing next week. They're going to lose the next game if they view this as a national championship game.
I think that's a good point. You got to play every game one day at a time, and this is a brand new season. It feels like this whole new playoff thing is such a new thing. But I do think that you're right. If you think that you've done it by winning this game, you're going to be sorely mistaken next week. But I also do think these two teams, I think, could beat anybody in the country. So I think it's great to see them play against each other. And I don't care that it's early. If you're going to have to beat Ohio State to win the championship, let's do it now.
Whoever ends up winning this game will be the prohibitive favorite to win it all. The only reason these two teams aren't the favorite right now is because they have to play against each other.
Sure.
And once that is done, then whoever wins is going to be the one that is expected to win it all.
Yeah, I agree.
Ryan, is there anything you wanted to ask?
Well, I was going to ask you
here.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts on some of the keys to the game? What are your thoughts on what Oregon needs to do to stay in it, or to win the thing, or what does Ohio State need to do to stay in it and win the thing?
Steve?
Well, we're so in tune with this running game conundrum that that Ohio State's got to be able to run the ball to win the game. stop the run to win the game. And I think it is important. I think there were games this year where Ohio State got in trouble because the other team was able to run the ball and pick up first downs and convert third downs and these kind of things. And that's not something you want to see Oregon get in the pattern of doing, of playing keep away and extending drives and these kind of things, and Ohio State not being able to do it on its side of the ledger. So, I look at Penn State had almost 300 yards rushing against Oregon this last game. And again, is Ohio State able to even get 150? I mean, I think that's a kind of a question based on the changes with the offensive line, the injuries Ohio State's had, playing the younger guys. I think Luke Montgomery was a nice addition in the last game at guard as part of a rotation there with Sierreveld and Shabola, and we'll see how that plays out in this game if they're going to go with that again. It sounds like they will. As David Walker says, will the O-line hold up? And that's kind of a big question, and then you have the outside guys, Birch, and the other defensive end are going to create problems in pass protection. Ohio State did not allow Michigan or Tennessee, however, to sack the quarterback. So the pass protection's been really good with this makeshift offensive line, which has been, a godsend, I think, for them to be able to keep. He got injured on a scramble, basically. Right. Howard did, not sitting in the pocket. So to my way of thinking, the offensive line's got to play great for Ohio State, create those running lanes for Judkins and Henderson, and let them get outside and let them keep Oregon's defense honest. So you can't put, you have to put, extra guys in the box, and you don't have to, you won't be able to bracket or double team the receivers. So, Jeremiah Smith is a total mismatch. And, if they come up a situation where he's one-on-one, Howard's going to take full advantage of that. So that's going to be interesting to watch how that unfolds. But it's all a chess match. They know each other so well. There's 13 games on tape for both teams. They played each other. So there is so much, almost too much data, I think, for the coaches to sift through at this point and spook themselves into trying to prepare for every eventuality. You can't do that. You have to come up with what you think is the best and let it rip. That's all you can do.
Paralysis by analysis.
Exactly. Before you get started there, number 77 on the line, Shabola.
Yeah.
What's the story there? Because it looked like was he hurt in the last game at the end of the thing, or did he just get taken out? I know he was kind of ridiculed for some of his play earlier in the Michigan game as well.
Yeah, so they've been doing a rotation at right guard and left guard, frankly, with Shabola and Austin Sierreveld, who will play left guard and right guard. It's just they've got a three-man rotation going. Shabola has been pretty shaky for most of the season. Even to start the season, Sierreveld was playing some mixing in at right guard with Shabola taking a seat at times. So not an injury thing. It's just a lack of consistency thing more than anything. But also the coaches will tell you, well, it's a meritocracy. And they even said that today, as guys have earned playing time, we're going to find them playing time. And now it has reached the offensive line where you almost never have a rotation anywhere because you want to have that cohesion. But Luke Montgomery has mixed in. He's now been mixing in, rotating in at left guard with Sierreveld. Then Sierreveld will go over to right guard when Montgomery's in. So they've just got this little musical chairs thing going on. And it worked. It actually worked against Tennessee. And they're going to continue to do that again. But I'm interested to see how then Tennessee attacks each different guy who has like a different weakness or a different strength. And if Ohio State plays to those strengths, then that kind of tells Oregon what they're going to do. So like if Luke Montgomery's in and he's really good at pulling, then and that's what he did the bulk of the previous game. Oregon's like, well, we kind of know what's coming. So you can't get too predictable with that either. Generally, a rotation of any kind on the offensive line is bad news. And
this one, flag.
There wouldn't be a rotation if Shabola was all conference. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it's a little bit unorthodox, but for them, I think that you get the best play out of all three guys. If there's 70 plays in a game, you limit each of them to 45 plays. I think that you're going to get the best, effort out of all of them for those 45 plays. And I think that makes a little bit of a difference. Shabola is 6'6", 328 pounds, which ordinarily you'd say, maybe he's a tackle, but he doesn't seem to have the feet or the athleticism to be able to stop a speed rusher coming off the edge. They have run behind him several times with good success. It's just consistency with him. It's being able to bring it at all times. And, again, he's a younger guy, I guess a third-year guy, but really hadn't played a whole lot prior to this season. And so, he's a guy that's picking it up as he goes. And I think that is has been, a bit of a baptism for him. And, for them to piece it together without, the guy who was an All-American, Seth McLaughlin at center, and Josh Simmons, who was playing an outstanding role at left tackle, who went down with the injury in the Oregon game. Those two guys, if you put them on this line, I don't want to say Ohio State would be unbeatable, but they'd be pretty close to unbeatable. So, you think about it, I guess from the Ohio State standpoint is cross your fingers and hope that offensive line holds up through an entire 4-quarter game. And, we're going to get down to the fourth quarter of this game and somebody is going to make a play that really changes this thing. And it should just be one heck of a 4-hour romp. I think we're in for something really, really a lot of fun on Wednesday afternoon and evening.
I agree. And so on that offensive line, was that the case before the injuries, or is it in a result of the injuries? Because when they moved Donovan Jackson out to tackle, is that correct? Is that when that started?
Yeah.
Well,
they've gone through like 5 different lineups in 13 games. So they put a guy in, Zen Mahalski, for one game, and he got hurt. So then they had to change it again. And that's when they put Donovan Jackson from guard, who was probably all Big Ten guard, out to tackle. And he's done a good job. I think Jackson's an NFL player. I think Simmons and McLaughlin are NFL players. So, you had 3 and now you only have 1. So that's kind of tells you where you're at.
Remember, early in the season, before the season started, I think it was before spring, one of the first times we talked to Chip, he talked about Bill O'Brien telling him that there are 3 guys that would start in the NFL right now on the offensive line. And I remember tweeting that and reporting it, and people were like, just laughing and scoffing at the idea. And he was clearly talking about Simmons, who was being talked about as a first or second rounder. Seth McLaughlin goes and wins the Remington. And then Donovan Jackson may actually be a better left tackle than left guard the way he's played this year. So I think they've done well. But, there have been so many iterations of this offensive line that it's a tough task to go to your 6th and 7th guy and have them be able to start. And having Carson Hinsman be one of those guys who was the starting center last year, that's a luxury that almost nobody has. And so then he played guard, and then he's been to center. So they've got veterans, and even the young guys that have been playing have been able to start some games, because Donovan Jackson missed the first 2 games. So Austin Sierreveld started for him as a redshirt freshman because he had done enough in camp. And normally Ohio State wants nothing to do with redshirt freshmen starting on the offensive line. So that's what Hinsman was a year ago, and things didn't always go great. But I'm going to say this. I know Ohio State fans are going to be mad. You got to give Justin Fry his credit this year for being able to do what he's done on the offensive line.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, the offensive line's done a pretty good job being piecemeal together, like you said, man. It's a lot of iterations of the same thing. What are your thoughts on this game, Mark?
Well, I was just going to ask these two if they thought that, considering what happened to Denzel Burke in particular, whether Jim Knowles was going to switch things up, whether we were going to see just a completely different approach. There's always the guessing game in terms of how much pressure do you put on with 4 versus how much do you get exotic with blitzes.
Right.
Of course, Jordan James has to be contained in all of this as well.
I do think they'll be more aggressive because it's been effective for them, and that's what Ryan Day has mandated. Now, I don't know that you need to be – here's the thing. Should you be more aggressive against Dylan Gabriel? They want to change the picture. They want to get him uncomfortable. It's hard to get him uncomfortable, but then once you collapse the pocket and chase him out, are you creating more issues by then freeing him and getting him out of the pocket? Because at times you are. So if you're going to blitz and you're going to change some things up, you better get him because he's going to keep looking around. And then maybe you can take advantage of some of the throws that he tries to squeeze into windows because he does not have the strongest arm. He's accurate, but he can maybe test the defense a little bit that maybe he shouldn't. And we've seen the red zone interceptions this year as kind of proof of that. But if they have to create some pressure through some blitzing. And if they don't and they're able to get it just through the defensive line, then Ohio State wins. But I don't think that that's going to be the case because this is a pretty good offensive line. Two good tackles that can be outstanding at times.
Yeah, Oregon's offensive line has done a pretty good job this year against some pretty good talent they've faced up against. I mean, there's some pretty good dudes that they've gone up against, and they've had a very consistent line since basically the third week. They had some injuries right out of the gate that they had to deal with, but yeah, no, this is an offensive line that's pretty tried and true at this point, and they're healthy. Defensive line looks good for Oregon as well. I think the trenches is a good matchup. I think Oregon and Ohio State are two very, very good teams in the trenches. And I don't know if that's always necessarily how the rest of the country sees it, but I think this year they're both very physical, very fast, very strong teams.
The defensive line that I saw against Washington was the best defensive line I saw all year, but it wasn't the same defensive line I saw against Penn State. So I know they're good because I saw them against Ohio State as well, and Jordan Birch wasn't there, but they dominated. They sacked Washington 10 times. Now they're facing a true freshman quarterback.
Right. And I was about to say the quarterback has a lot to do with that because, like I said, with Bo was very apt at trying to get out of pressure, and their quarterback was not at all. I would also say go put on that film of the Penn State-Washington game. Penn State completely dominated Washington as well. So something to be said about the Penn State game. And the Penn State game Penn State even kind of lulled you guys into a little bit of a trap in that game. That was a tough game for you Buckeyes to finish off as well. They're a good team. I think that's something to be said. And it felt like they played very fast on that turf. That in that Lucas Oil Stadium, it felt like Penn State was a very, very fast team. And I don't know if that was expected either.
Hey, how about this? Penn State got a better draw than Ohio State and Ohio State and Oregon both.
I know. I like that.
What a pisser.
It's a weird deal. But you know what? I tend to think I'd rather be at these games. I would hate to go to, no offense to Boise State or Arizona State, but I don't know. I love the fact that Oregon and Ohio State are playing this game. It's the one that matters.
The classic game.
It's the one that matters, man. It's the one that matters, and it's the classic. It's at the Rose Bowl. Everything's right about this game. So there might be some other stuff down the road that might not be as great with some of the filtering and this stuff out, next year or whatever else to figure the thing out. But this is what we have this year. This is what we all agreed upon this year. Let's go play this thing out, man.
I bet the coaches are happier to have this as game 14 rather than game 16 or 17 because they're as healthy as they're going to be right now. And you don't want to play two more games.
Yeah, both these teams look good. I mean, Ohio State looked very Ohio State looked tired in the Michigan game. Oregon looked tired in the Penn State game. And it felt like at the end of the year, it was a long gauntlet of a season. You have to get through those last couple weeks. They always come up and bite you. Ohio State looked so fresh against Tennessee. Boy, they looked so good. And hopefully we'll see the same thing in the Rose Bowl. We'll see two teams that are both refreshed and ready to play.
I think for Ohio State, a big key, and you touched on this, was getting some sort of pressure on Gabriel. Even if you don't sack him, you make his throws a little more difficult with a hand in his face. And Ohio State just didn't really succeed in doing that the first time around. He was kept pretty clean. Ohio State's coming off a game against Tennessee where Tui Maloau, 2 sacks, Sawyer 1.5 sacks. They played, again, one of their best games, as a tandem this past game. And now they're gearing up for, the Vision Quest. This is it. I mean, you win this game and you get to the Final Four, I think that you have redeemed yourself in good stead for what happened against Michigan, regardless of what may happen the rest of the way. And even having said that, I think you've set yourself up pretty well because you're going to play Texas or Arizona State in the next game. The winner of this game is set up pretty good, in my feeling, to get to the championship game. I actually give Arizona State a chance to pull off the upset because they've played some really good football here down the stretch. Boise State, their only hope, to my feeling, is Genty has got to have like 200 yards and 3 long touchdown runs. I think something just super extraordinary has to happen for Boise State to win that game. I don't think it's going to. I don't think Penn State runs away with it necessarily, but I just don't know how. I mean, Penn State, to me, by the way that they played Oregon the last 3 quarters, that was about as good a 3 quarters of football that Penn State's played in 10 years. I agree. I'm not joking. I mean, that was different from James Franklin than anything we've seen. The problem was they dug themselves such a big hole, early on that they were digging out. I mean, you give up 31 points in the first half. I mean, it's hard to win a game doing that. So, I like Penn State. And the other one, I assume Georgia's going to win, but damn, Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame have been on a rampage. Now, a lot of it's who they've played. They haven't played top teams in this 10-game winning streak or whatever it is. But, I just think Georgia's probably the better team and, we'll win that game. But, we're in for, Tuesday and Wednesday. We are in for it. I think we are in for just a great time. I want to ask Brian 2 things. 1, a lot of rumors Lanning to the Bears, and 2, just what after 1 football season. I mean, it couldn't have gone any better for Oregon, for God's sake, to win all 10 of their Big Ten games, for God's sake. Just the thought of being in the Big Ten. I mean, I think for those of us who grew up with regionalized conferences, to wrap our mind around the fact that we're sending baseball, basketball, softball teams 3,000 miles just doesn't make any sense. But then you have this football spectacle with Ohio State and Oregon, and you say, oh, I get it now. But I don't know. What's your thought about it?
Yeah, when it comes to the conference realignment and comes to all that sort of stuff, I think we were in a tough spot because we knew that our conference was just basically dying, and our conference was going to be picked apart by the sharks that are in the water. And we were just hoping that we were going to get to be able to be landed in some sort of a zone that was going to be beneficial. When it ended up that it was the Big Ten, I think we were elated because the Big Ten is looked at as being one of the tried and true conferences, and it's not going anywhere. There's no East Coast bias with it. It's in the East Coast. And I think that was a big deal for the Ducks. I don't think many Duck fans thought that they were going to go in and run the table. I know that there was people who were like, well, you're going to have a tough game at Michigan. You obviously have the Ohio State game. But as soon as the Ducks got past those first couple games that were close, then they beat Ohio State in that absolute thriller. It was like, maybe this could be the case. Maybe this happens. And the Ducks just took care of business this year. It was a very good year. When it comes to landing to the pros, I don't think it's going to happen. And I think the reason why is because his own history, he bounced around a bunch when he was young. This is the first place that he's put down any roots. He's got young kids. They really like it in Eugene. I think that he's seen a bunch of his friends in the industry go into the pros and not really benefit them at this point in the game. The college game is becoming more like the pros. It feels like there's a unique situation at Oregon. He's tapped into it. Like I said on Mark's show last year, that when he said that the grass is damn green in Eugene, that was like the biggest moment in the whole thing. And that was in response to a parent who was concerned that he was going to go take the Alabama job. And the parent said, well, would you make a video? And so we made this video, or had the creative team make the video or whatever. They put the video out, and then that goes viral. So it's like, I think that right now it's a unique time to be a Duck. The Ducks are absolutely flying high. I know there's some confident Duck fans, maybe overconfident, just like you have with the Buckeye fans, that think that they're going to win every game just because they're a fan of their team. But the Ducks realistically right now are a really solid athletic budget program. They were the only budget that made any money in any of these schools out here on the West Coast outside of UCLA or outside of USC. They're the number 1 team in basketball right now in the Big Ten. They're the number 1 team in football in the Big Ten. I think the Ducks have earned their respect a little bit coming into this conference. And we carried the water in our conference for a decade where literally no one was giving anybody credit out here. We tried to do what was best there. And I think they're coming into this conference pretty hot and still have a lot of respect for it. But at the same time, we like to do things different. I don't know if you saw the commercial where the Duck was on the motorcycle, like carving up the grass. It was like in the summertime, and showed this guy mowing the lawn, everything, and then it shows the duck on the motorcycle ripping all this grass up in the shape of an O. And that was like some like welcome to the Big Ten stuff. So we'll try to do things different. We'll try to push the envelope. We'll try to have fun with it. We'll try to be, new age and cool or whatever. But that can kind of rub some of the traditionalists the wrong way. But I think on the field and what we have as an athletic department, I think you'll be very proud of the Ducks and what they do for this conference.
Just real quick, I just want to correct you. You said that Dan Lanning wouldn't be going to the pros. Steve asked if he's going to go to the Chicago Bears. Those are two very different things.
Hey, funny story. The Amazon game was it? Who did the game the other day? Netflix.
Yeah.
Netflix on Christmas. They had CM Punk, who's from Chicago, the wrestler, and he's on the pregame show in Pittsburgh. To promote wrestling going on the Netflix in January. And they bring up the Bears to him, and he goes, the Bears are never going to do anything until the McCaskey family, divests itself of the ownership. And I feel living in Ohio, we could say the same thing about the Haslams with the Browns and the Brown family with the Bengals. I mean, it's never going to happen. But, for him a Chicago guy to go on the national show and, talk about that, it is true. The Bears – and, just they're kind of under a dark cloud. Even the godforsaken Detroit Lions have suddenly stumbled into some success.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
That was the worst run professional franchise in North America for decades. And, now they're, possible Super Bowl contenders. So, yeah, it can happen for anybody. But, I want to see the Browns in the Super Bowl before I die. So, I'm hoping to live another 25, 30 years. Maybe it'll happen. I don't know.
They got to get underneath Deshaun Watson's contract first.
Oh, my God.
That's for another show, Mark. That's another 20-minute debacle.
Oh,
Hey, Ryan, I want to ask you one other question. Before the game, they, loved the stadium at Autzen Stadium, the setup. Everything was first rate, first class, just loud crowd, just so invested in the game. They made an announcement before the game at Autzen Stadium, and it never rains at Autzen Stadium. Have you ever been to a game there when it did rain?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So actually, that whole thing started. Don Essig is the guy, PA announcer, legend. He's been the PA announcer my whole life. Historically, they used to have umbrellas at Autzen Stadium. Then they banned umbrellas, and then they banned cigarette smoking. This was all kind of like in maybe like the 80s, 90s. In the bowl, you can't smoke cigarettes, and you couldn't have the thing. And so Don Essig would go on and do a announcement of this, and his announcement would be like, "You're not going to need your umbrellas today because it's not going to rain or whatever." And so then it came up with this kind of thing. It never rains at Autzen Stadium, and then they thought, well, this is not the deal anymore. It hadn't rained for years for whatever reason, and they said, well, no, it's more of a mindset. It's always sunny. It's always positive, And so, but yeah, Don Essig does a great one. It starts as basically the weather report. I do the PA announcing. I'm a high school teacher, and I do the PA announcing for my high school football team. And I've done the Don Essig thing. I basically just do it's the weather report. It's like, it's 62 degrees. Slight wind from the north.
We are ready for high school football.
He's like, let our friends from Columbus know it never rains. And it's a nice little call and response from the stadium. We have a little different thing at our high school, but I've incorporated basically the same sort of thing where I wheel out the weather report in the real dramatic fashion, Shout out to Don Essig, legend.
That is phenomenal.
All right. Well,
I got one more for you.
Yeah, shoot.
Which would be for all of you. Which team would want to be the team to trot their place kicker out onto the field with 3 seconds left from 45 yards, or do both of them want to be on defense on special teams to basically say, we'll let your guy try it?
What are your thoughts there, gents?
I put my money on Atticus Finch.
Well, would it be Finch at that point, or would it be the long kicker at that point? I know I don't feel comfortable with Jaden Fielding past like 42 yards. Like beyond that, and really, what do you feel comfortable with any college kicker? But once you start getting beyond that, you got to start thinking about going for it. Unless it's like 4th and 16.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does get a little wild when you have the deep long kick, the low trajectory kick. It's always a danger zone when you have your non-regular kicker kicking the field goal. You have your kickoff kicker kicking it because it's so deep. We also have an Atticus. We have Atticus Sappington.
Sappington, yes.
Yeah.
The Atticus there was another Atticus on the last game. There were two Atticuses.
There were two Atticus.
I think it's Attici. Once there's
is that multiple Atticus?
Right. So
Atticus Sappington. Yeah, great guy. His parents own a restaurant here in Portland called the Country Cat. If you fly into PDX, they have one in PDX. Fantastic. Highly recommend.
I loved Portland. We had a great time there.
Hey,
and
you hear that, Mark?
I heard it.
We need to put. Hey, can we clip that, Mark? And can we put that as just a separate video of somebody who's not from here saying, "I loved Portland"?
yeah, it was nice. And
not a gun to your head either.
I will say I'm hoping that Eugene gets more flights because I'd rather skip the 2.5-hour drive down and back.
It's a tough airport to get into Eugene. But yeah, no, Portland's coming around, man. I don't know if you watch any Fox News or anything, but yeah, Portland is a little bit of a punching bag for some of the nation.
Yeah.
Whenever I go around to other, because I try to go to as many of these games as possible. I went to Detroit, and I'm staying in Detroit. The people are like, "You're going where?" And it's like, "Yeah, I'm going over to the Walmart. I got to get some beer." They're like, "I don't know. You're in Detroit." I said, "I'm from Portland." They're like, "Oh, you're fine.
Yeah,
no problem. Right this way, sir." That's so good.
Hey, any questions you ever have about where to go in the Big Ten, Tony and I can answer them because we've been to all these places 10 times. So
I love it. Well, we're going to try to go to all the stadiums. That's one of my things. My son's a photographer. Shouts out to my son. He's on the field for these games. He's a freshman at Oregon. So we try to get as many games as possible. I went to every game but 2 this year. So I'm going to try to go to the rest of them. So it's a fun time, man.
Yeah.
If you're going to miss one, what would it be? Maybe Maryland. Maybe College Park would be.
Rutgers.
Rutgers is not the one. I want to see the soccer field next year at Northwestern before they're done with it as a one-timer experience. Why not?
Well, Maryland, I'll say, if you've never been to the nation's capital,
I have.
Maryland is right. I mean, it's 15 miles from the Washington Monument. I mean,
wow.
Here's the border. And it's not near Baltimore. It's near Washington, D.C.
Right,
Baltimore is 45 miles up the road. So, that was what I would tie that into. And the issue with Rutgers is it's 40 miles from Manhattan. So, I mean, you can, 30. It's 45 minutes, though, in a car with the traffic. You can go and take the train to New York and whatever and go to New York City. But, those are the only redeeming qualities of those trips, though. So
now, how do you get into Penn State the right way?
You drive.
You don't. That's what I heard. That's what I heard.
We drive. We drive. I think everybody else can fly into Pittsburgh, take a connection from somewhere to Pittsburgh, and then it's about a 90-minute, maybe 2-hour drive from Pittsburgh.
And you can't stay in Penn State. You can't stay in State College because all the hotel rooms are booked, and then they're two night minimum. So you got to stay like an hour and a half away. So it's
Altoona,
Interesting. All right, we'll make do. We'll see what we can do over there.
Yeah, we'll help you out. If you ever got any question, let us know.
All right, well, we're definitely going to try to go to the Penn State game next year. It's early.
You have to go.
The Penn State game for us is like I think last week of September.
You have to go because it's one of the greatest settings in college football. So.
Absolutely. So yeah, no. And then I'd like to see if I can get to the Northwestern game. It feels like Northwestern is easy to get to, flying to Chicago.
Oh yeah. Easy.
All right. Well, hey, gentlemen, maybe I'll see you out in Pasadena. Have a great time out on the West Coast. Enjoy it.
Looking forward to it. You as well.
We appreciate you, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Mark. Mark, I really appreciate everything you do for college football, for all of those college football fans out there holding it down, the voice of college football.
Agreed.
Your network is tremendous. Everything else that's out there, you have done a great job. We appreciate you always, Mark.
Because of you as well for jumping on here with us for a long, long time, Ryan. Enjoy
Anytime
the ball.
You need it, guy. All right, blessings, you guys, man. Have fun and enjoy your time, man.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right, we'll see you guys.
One quick one before we take off here. The Buckeyes got themselves a tight end from Purdue, of all places, but he's a good one, Max Clare. Now, how in the world did they get a tight end to come to Ohio State and promise him that he's going to get more than 20 receptions, Tony?
Well, I mean, they can show the Cade Stover highlights of Cade Stover catching 40 passes or so, but also, it's not just about catching, it's about becoming more well-rounded tight end as well. But this guy, and I forget all of the stats that I had when he committed, but I think he's got 3 receptions of 40+ yards this year. The only guy who has more as a tight end is the guy at the Bowling Green.
Bowling Green guy.
Yeah. And he has 4. So he is a receiving guy that can also block, a really good guy that can just step in next year and be one of the starters, because they're pretty deep right now. Now we don't know who they're going to lose, but they've played a lot of tight ends this year, so they'll have a lot of guys next year who can step in and be a part of a 3 or 4 man rotation. And this guy, he was the best guy out there at tight end, and they got him.
The worst team in the country supplied some other teams with some of the best players in the transfer portal, including this guy, Max Clare. 51 catches, 685 through the air, 4 touchdowns coming to the Buckeyes.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, anything else? Or we hit on?
The team is going to have a walkthrough tomorrow at the Woody Hayes Center, and then they're going to board a plane and head out to California, and they will be at their hotel around 6 p.m. Pacific time. There'll be a really brief press conference with Cody Simon and Will Howard at the hotel. That'll be the only media for the team tomorrow. And then on Monday will be a gigantic media day at the Media Hotel downtown Los Angeles. And they're going to have most, if not the entire team there. And Tony and I will be running around with chickens with our heads cut off, trying to talk to as many of these turkeys as we can. So that'll be a fun day on Monday. The coaches press conference on Tuesday, the game at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, and at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, one of these 2 teams will be headed on to the semifinals down at the Cotton Bowl to play the winner of the Texas-Arizona State game. So, and that game's on January the 10th. So these things just keep coming at you. They're hurtling at you at the speed of light. So here we go.
Tony, what do people need to know about what you're working on this week?
Well, we recorded a bunch of listener questions shows for the Buckeye Weekly podcast today that will drop over today and then tomorrow, because you lose an entire day traveling. So we're going to try to have some pre-planned content there at the podcast. And then I'm hoping to get an opportunity to write something, but I'm going to be at the airport in about 12 hours and I need at least 13 hours of sleep before I do that. So I'm not sure how much of my day is left, but check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We got certainly coverage of this game, and we got everything that everybody had to say today. You can find a recap there. And we talked to Chip Kelly, Will Howard, Jeremiah Smith. We could have spent an hour talking about all of the things that Jeremiah Smith said today and the things that were said about him today. Quinshon Judkins talked to in Emeka Ibuka. So you can find those updates at BuckeyeHuddle.com.
Yep. I got a feature on Jeremiah Smith up there as well on Bucknuts. Just amazing talent. And he kind of laid out there his mindset, and the ball's in the air. It's his. And he said, we are hungry right now. That's how he kind of typified the offense for Ohio State coming off that feeding frenzy against Tennessee. They want to do it again against Oregon.
Tony and Steve, we appreciate it. We know you're running around like Steve said, chicken with your heads cut off, even before you really run around like chickens with your heads cut off during media day. So thanks for making time for us this weekend. Tony, Steve, have a great trip.
Sir.
Yep. Take care.